Howdy guys and gals, welcome to the Social Regressive, where we're going to take a look at one of the coolest replacement stocks on the market right now. In some previous videos we took a look here at the Boyds Spike Camp. This is a wonderful thumbhole stock, and this one costs anywhere from $100 to about $130 depending on your action and maybe some of the extras that you include in here. It is very comfortable, it's just a great shape overall, and I think that a lot of you guys are really going to dig this. If you want to check out that video, we actually have two of them where we've discussed the shape itself and how it might work for your rifle, and then I showed how quickly you can install it onto a Savage Axis. But what we're going to look at today is something that heads in a little bit more of an upscale direction. Very similar, but if you want to have the ability to kind of configure things more specifically for you, then this one is the one you want to take a look at. This is the Boyds At-One Thumbhole. So this has a very similar shape through here, which is really the critical area, but then you also get the kind of uprated parts that you get with the Boyds At-One. The regular Boyds At-One is going to have replaceable grip panels, so you can kind of switch between a more vertical grip and a more laid-back hunter-style grip. And aside from that, you're going to have all these movable parts that you can see here. So you can adjust the cheek riser, you can adjust the butt back here, and you can swap out some of these panels like here on the forearm, where you can get maybe more of a little bit of a beaver tail-ish sort of fit. It's going to feel your hand a little bit better, and it's going to get rid of these kind of angular panels through here, which some people just won't like. And then you also have this little panel down here. So if you want to be able to put a little piece of M-lock, I believe, or Picatinny down here. So if you have some kind of special bag rider or maybe a monopod, you can attach it back here. So yeah, this one is much more configurable. As you can see, you can do a lot with this, and there are all kinds of neat little at-one parts that we can swap around back here. But this is the big deal that I want to talk about right here, and that is this grip. So this is very much like the Spike Camp. We'll talk about some of the differences, but the thing here is that you get a really sweet angle. It's kind of like the AR-15A2 grip, the way that it lays back. So it's going to get you sort of a blend between a hunter-style grip that has more of a backward rake and a more vertical grip of a target rifle. So this is one that is going to be very comfortable for your offhand shooting, but if it does come time to get in the prone, it's not going to be as bad as a stock like this one. And what we should do right now really is talk about the deficiencies of your typical plastic stock. This is a Ruger American in .270 Winchester, and it's a great rifle. I've talked before about how modern hardware, even on these inexpensive rifles, is just great. We have some wonderful options nowadays from pretty much all the manufacturers. Howa 1500, Remington 783, Savage Axis. There are just a bunch of really good ones out there. And this one has quite a chunk of the market now. So this has the ability to pretty easily remove your barrel and change your headspace if you want to swap to different calibers. This is an easy one to do. And yeah, just everything back through here is very well set up. It has a good solid bolt, a great trigger that you can kind of tweak for yourself to get the pull that you want. And you know, by default, this is going to have a very crisp trigger. The Ruger is pretty darn good. And you can just switch how much energy it takes to pull that back, how much pressure it's going to take to make it snap. Safety lays back in a really good area right down here. And in general, these kinds of, the stock that you see attached to this, they are getting better on these inexpensive rifles. However, these tend to be the one thing that's holding your rifle back. And in this rifle right here in particular, this one is a particularly egregious example of the type. So right here, let's just talk about the overall shape. You're going to get the usual traditional, hunting style grip running back through here. That falls quite a bit back. It has this curve to it. And some of the issues that you're going to run into with this, first off, if you do want to take a shot in the prone, it's a very unnatural angle and it's uncomfortable. If you're going to go into a long session of shooting out at the range, you want to be able to just plunk down and start firing for a while. This one gets uncomfortable very quickly. It really kinks the wrist because your hand is trying to kind of sit forward like this, and you're trying to keep your elbow down on the ground. And you can see what that's doing to my my wrist right there. It is unnatural, uncomfortable, and after just a short range session, it's pretty awful. Back through here, we do have a good thin wrist, so it's going to be easy to get your thumb up around the top. But these ambidextrous style stocks are going to, as you can see, they kind of start a little bit high. They tend to slope backward. And these just don't really fit the face as well as a lot of others, especially once you get your scope on top. The best that you can hope for with a lot of these is to get more of a chin weld rather than a cheek weld. This right here is where I want my stock to sit. I want to feel very comfortable with a lot of cheek applied there so that it feels like I'm not going to be moving around and it's sort of resting on my cheekbone. And this is one that in general is not going to work. It depends on what scope you run, what scope rings, and I would say for the most part, make sure you get some good low scope rings for a rifle like this. And then you're also going to be stuck with a fixed, usually 13.5-inch length of pole. So that's going to be the distance from the back of the butt pad right there to the front of the trigger face. And that is going to be fine for most shooters. That's the way that most of these rifles are set up. But I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'2". This does not feel very comfortable for me, and so having that adjustable butt back here is really a big deal. I really need that 14.5-inch length of pole in order to feel comfortable behind the rifle. But here's the biggest deal with these plastic stocks that you get on these new Wonder rifles and why they're really holding you back from your maximum potential. This one right here is probably made of a more rigid plastic than they used to be. Some of these are very floppy, like my old Stevens 200 stock that came on there. That one, it was so flexible that if I were on a bipod or if I were on a rest, no joke, I could make a group anywhere from a half MOA because the hardware was good, but because of the stock, that half MOA group could open up to 6 MOA, no joke. We're talking at 100 yards that suddenly I would throw a round or 6 inches away. It could be anywhere in that area. So this one is going to do the exact same thing, I think. Maybe this one wouldn't be that bad. This is a more rigid plastic. I can feel that. This one doesn't want to move all that easily. They probably have some good ribs running through here. And the plastic itself is probably a bit better. But I can already see and feel that this entire side of the barrel channel is touching the barrel. This is a big no-no. This is going to cause a lot of problems because as I fire, it's going to change the harmonics of this barrel. It's going to change the node, and I'm just going to get some weird results. This is not going to shoot as well as it should. I can actually move the barrel and the stock into the right place by pressing just like this, but this is too tight and it is kind of twisted off to one side. There are those that are better. The Savage 12 FV, for example, the more modern one that I bought, that one didn't have any issues like that, and that one probably would have shot just fine. But because this one is touching and because of all the other issues, I just want to make this a more capable rifle in every situation. We're going to swap this out, and this is going to fix everything at once. We're going to get greater rigidity all through here. We're going to get this wonderful, comfortable thumb hole, and we're going to get all the adjustable parts back here. This is actually going to be a little bit of a tricky swap to do. Some of the other rifle types, like the Savage Axis, all you have to do is just pull the action out, and then you can screw everything into place. But today we're going to take the time to lock this one into place because this stock takes a little bit of extra work. The Ruger American Action is a little bit of an odd duck compared to most of the other rifles out there, and this one will take a little bit longer to install. We have to put these V-blocks in instead of the usual recoil lug recess and screws. So for the Savage Axis, that was relatively quick. We just popped it in, put some screws in, and we were done. But this one, we do have to use some epoxy, get these parts precisely in place. But the cool thing is that when we're done, we're going to have a custom fit, and it should lock up very tightly and be a very precise rifle in the end. Don't forget that on the Boyds Accessories page, you can get some extra uprated parts for this, so you can order some of these extra panels for the front. You can get different butt pads for the back, so I actually have a 1-inch thick Limbsaver that we can tack onto the back to make this more comfortable overall and to increase the length of pull, so we actually will be putting that on there. But then you also have some upgraded trigger guards. This one comes with a plastic one. It seems like it's a better plastic than they used to have. It seems to be fiber reinforced. But you can get some better parts out there. If you'd like to see a short action Ruger American installed into a stock, check out this video down below. We swapped this over to a Boyds At-One, the regular one that has the configurable grips. And it's really the same thing. Today we're going to be doing the exact same thing. It's just a difference of spacing. That's all. But before we jump into the actual install, let's check out some of the shape issues with this. We're going to talk about what makes this grip so special. A thumb hole, especially this one, is going to be much more comfortable, in my opinion, for certain types of shooting. If you want, this traditional stock is great for you hunters that want to be able to get that snapshot. All of your kind of parts are in line. You have your hand in line, roughly with the bore. It's very close up. Everything is just kind of all in one neat line. But what this is going to do is really grip the hand very well, and it sort of makes the stock more an extension of your body rather than a bent stick that you're grabbing. And that's why when I designed my own stock for telekinesis, I did exactly that. I wanted something that would feel like a glove that's holding my hand. And I really did end up doing that. I love the feel of that stock, and this is very similar as well. You sort of get a real pistol grip where it's smooth all the way around. You get a nice little palm swell right back through here. And then right up here in the web of the hand, the stock is just kind of holding on to you, and it feels much more like an integral part of you when you go to take the shot. So this is designed for offhand shooting for the most part. You're going to be leaning into it just like you would with one of these, and everything just feels, I think, a bit more natural. My wrist is not kinked up. Everything is more neatly in a line going back through here. And just the way that this grips my hand, it doesn't feel like I'm about to slide off. I'm not concerned about the reach to the trigger. It's just a nice short reach overall. This is the one that I personally would choose. The only thing that you might think about is, okay, you will have a little bit more restricted space if you do have a big thick glove, but this one compared to the Spike Camp is a bit more open. So if you did want to have a thumb hole where you could wear a heavy winter glove, this is probably the one for you. But do remember that you have to get up to reach the safety. On this one, it's just going to be right under your thumb. With this, you do have to come out in order to grab it. It's not any kind of real issue. It is a little bit slower as you come out, and then you have to go back in. Just something to think about. But for me, I don't think it would be a big deal. One other difference between this and the Spike Camp, it feels like this grip may be just a little bit shorter overall. So if I'm in kind of the proper position, I have a little bit of pinky hanging off the bottom of the grip. It's very close. It's just a tiny bit of flesh hanging off the bottom. And then this, the trigger finger reaches in right here. And this does have a tiny bit of a shelf. So if there's one modification that I would make to this stock, if you guys want to go ahead and just touch this with some sandpaper and then maybe get a little matte polyurethane on here, if you're feeling brave, you might just take off the tiniest bit of material right through there, right on that edge, so that your trigger finger comes right in without kind of feeling any edges coming in on the trigger. That's something that I did on my telekinesis stock. Totally up to you. All right, now let's get down to the fun. Let's get all our parts and tools lined up. First off, we have the parts kit that came in the box. We have the epoxy that came in the box as well. That's going to allow us to stick those V-blocks in place. And then we also are going to need some kind of release agent. So here I have some grease that I could use, or my favorite, brown shoe polish. A lot of people swear by cooking spray though, so consider that. A lot of people really like that one. We're gonna need some kind of stir stick, a popsicle stick, or heck, you can even use a screwdriver to mix up the epoxy right here. And then we also want something to mix it on, so I keep my yogurt lids and raisin lids for that. Simple screwdrivers, just to take the action apart. And then what I recommend, and you don't actually need, you can use a Dremel tool to kind of rough up the insides of the stock, because we do want this to be as rough a surface as possible to make the epoxy stick for eternity. Grab yourself a couple rags too, because this is going to get messy. Magazine comes out. Switch it over to fire. bolt comes out. You have a little bit of a catch on this side. So you just press on this, and then you can pull the bolt all the way to the rear. Let's turn this puppy over. All right, there we go. Collect the screws, pitch the old stock into the trash can. Now you can probably sell that. And we're gonna slap the new one up into place. Usually I use a vise with this sort of work, but today I'm using the Champion Premium Rest. This is gonna be plenty for what I need. And this is a really cool piece of gear. I'll put a link to the full review down below because I really like how this works out at the range. This is not only a machine rest that allows me to get everything really neatly in place before I take my shot so I can test my groups, but this one works in the prone really well because it sits so low. I can just lay this on the ground and I can shoot this as if it were a prone rifle. So I kind of get the best of both worlds, sort of the bench machine sort of setup, but I can actually shoot prone, which is one of your more stable setups. Great little rest. The first thing I'm going to do is action prep. So I'm going to get rid of the existing oil, which is just fine that it's there, and we're going to want to put some back after we're all done with this. And we're going to swap this over to the shoe polish. So anything that might end up touching those V-blocks and any of the epoxy that's around them, we want to make sure that we have some kind of release agent in place to keep any epoxy from sticking. We want this to be able to come in and out without any problems. This is a simple enough job. Use a toothbrush if you want, use your finger if you want, but I'm just gonna get a thin coat, a thin, even coat, all the way across anywhere that might touch. Another good place to have some kind of release agent is inside these screw holes. So we are going to put just a tiny bit in there and probably just some oil. Make sure you get something inside there to keep any epoxy that ends up in there from sticking. We don't want the action screws to stick in place. This one toward the rear, especially here on the long action model, make sure you get a little bit inside the mag well, because this is very close to where that epoxy is going to end up, and we don't want any chunks sticking to the inside of the mag well. That would be pretty tragic. Another place to really pay attention to is going to be the trigger assembly right here. I definitely don't want anything sticking to this. While we're at it, let's take care of the screws. I'm just going to use some of that red high temperature bearing grease that I got from Walmart a long time ago. Set all of that aside, and now it's time for some stock prep. Take a look at your two V-blocks. This bigger one is going to go toward the front where you can see we have a little recess. This kind of acts like that recoil lug. So that is going to go into place right there, and then the rear one sits right in here. And you can see that we have a little bit of a shelf on this one side. So you can see that extra metal sticking out. That is going to be our rear mag catch. So this is the way that this is going to work eventually. The magazine with that little tab that pops up right there, that's going to sit right on top of that little shelf, and then it's going to clip into place at the front. Just so you can see how these are going to fit together. Now take note of any spot where metal is going to come at least within somewhat close proximity of wood. This is where we want to make sure that it's rough. Thankfully, it is a little bit rough in here already. This is pretty well chewed up right here where they've done some of the milling. We can, however, add some extra divots with the Dremel to get this a little bit uglier. We can chew just some little kind of divots, some little holes in there to get the epoxy to grip just a little bit harder. We can do that especially right through here where this is kind of smooth. Now, if you don't have a Dremel tool, you'll live. This is going to be fine. This looks rough enough that it's going to grab really well. But if you do want to take this extra step and you do have a Dremel tool or something else similar lying around, go ahead and do that. I'm just using this tungsten carbide burr. Looking good here on the back. Those should get us just a little bit more purchase, and we'll do some at the front. Keep these divots shallow. You're not working with a whole lot of material here, so don't go crazy digging into there. Just make enough that the epoxy can grab. Now this is a good time to point out something that I did not talk about before. Boyds now offers pillar bedding on most of their stocks. You're going to be able to see that as an option. It depends on your action how this is going to work. For the Savage Axis, it's going to be a single pillar at the rear, and you can see with this one they did both front and rear. So this is going to help us with our precision overall. This is really cool that they can just do this straight from the factory. If you're a DIYer, you like to kind of do things for yourself and use your own pillars, go ahead. It's really fun to do. I've done this with the Savage Axis and the Savage 12 FV. I've shown how easy and actually inexpensive it is to do this job. But for a few extra bucks, consider this on this stock. Whether you decide to put in the divots or scratches, one thing that we should do is try to remove as much of the finish as we can. These are sprayed en masse, I think. It's pretty much done in a wide swath, so there probably is some finish attached to the stock down here. And to clean that up, I'm just going to use some sandpaper and one of these little stir sticks. So I should be able to just get this right down in there and rough up these sections of wood. This is going to make the epoxy stick a little better anyway, even if this didn't have any finish on it. So there you go. You can see that flaking right off. Let's install the trigger guard. This is a simple matter. All we do is attach it here at the back. So in the package, we received this Savage style trigger guard. And again, remember that you can get the steel ones if you want. But what we're going to do is just pop in this one rear screw. This is a very coarse wood screw. And as we turn this in, pay very close attention. It's going to cut very easily. And this is not one that we're going to torque down a whole bunch. This one is, once we kind of get to the bottom and things are roughly seated in place, do not torque this because you can easily strip out that laminate. So that right there is going to be perfect. That's never going to come out. Don't worry about it. That's plenty. Whether you have pillars or just screw holes that are drilled through your stock, you're going to want to put some release agent on the inside of those holes. The best way to do that is actually going to be from the bottom here. We don't want any release agent on the top side where the blocks are going to connect. We want everything to be on the inside and on the bottom side right here. So with a Q-tip, just going to smear this around a bit. This is another thing that will help ensure that our screws, our action screws, don't stick. On the flip side, the two V blocks need to be as grease-free as possible. So I'm going to be using some 91% isopropyl alcohol. You could use some brake cleaner, a bunch of different ways to degrease this, but this needs to be as clean as possible. And now that we have these degreased, we kind of need to re-grease them. We do need to help make sure that this doesn't stick to the action anywhere. It needs to stick to the stock, but not the action, so I am going to put some of this right across the top of the V-block. And right here where the magazine attaches. There's not much of a chance that this is actually going to touch epoxy, but just in case. Now the rest of these, I definitely want to keep them perfectly dry and clean. This one is a little bit trickier than your usual setup. And then we do also want to make sure that we have some release agent on the inside of these holes. So again, I'm going to use my Q-tip with some grease on it and just get a thin coating going on the inside of those. As we begin to mix the epoxy, keep in mind that we will have a limited work time with this.
depending on what the temperature is. It says that if it's over 95 degrees, I believe, you're going to have 45 minutes. That is all. In a little bit lower temperatures, this is going to have a range that you want to do. Don't try to do this while it's freezing, I don't think. That usually doesn't work out well for me. But we should get about an hour of playtime with this. And I am going to go ahead and mix up all of this because that's a mistake that I made last time. This actually takes quite a bit of epoxy to fill in all of these gaps. Maybe we don't need exactly all of this, but I hate having to go back and mix up more later. Mix thoroughly and try to prevent air bubbles from forming. This is the tricky bit. This is a lot of epoxy. I don't need this much, but still, better than having to mix up some more. So what we're gonna start doing is carefully applying these in great big globs to the correct section. So there we go. That's where metal is going to have to, there's a great big gap, I should mention, between this part of the wood to where it goes down toward this bottom section here. Down here is very thin, of course, because that's where metal is actually touching. But there are some gaps with these V-blocks that kind of fit down in here. Now I am going to, as you can see, I'm putting it up against this wall up here as well. Not over the top like I just did, but I am going to need some epoxy up against that wall. This first one is looking good. Let's move on to the front. We do have some time. Remember, we have about an hour's worth of work time, but at that point, we need to absolutely stop. No more moving anything around. As you're doing this, think about all the places that wood will touch metal. And again, in these corners right down here, make sure that you have a pretty good glob going so that it can take up that gap. I'm feeling good about this. Things are about to get messy. You guys ready to go? All right, let's do it. That's looking good. That indicates that I have enough epoxy going all the way around. I have some gushing out in various areas. Great. We'll need to clean that up, but that's a good indication right there. Now for the front. I didn't have as much come up on this one. There might be some little gaps, but I can see it moving around under there, so I think we are in fine shape. What we need to do now is remove the excess. So I'm going to use the other end of this popsicle stick that I've been using. And we're going to start scraping away a little bit of this excess. As I'm taking a closer look, no, we actually do need a little bit more. Thankfully, we do have plenty of work time. So I'm going to pull this out. Okay, yeah, I can see where there were some air gaps. We're not getting much under here, so I'm going to go ahead and apply some directly to the piece itself. Same on this side. And I'm going to get a bit more going up the sides, right up here. I could see some pretty big gaps right up at the top of where the lug is. All right, let's give that a shot. Oh yeah, that's more like it. Okay, yeah, gorgeous. That has filled in the gaps nicely. And now we'll scrape away some more. If you like V-blocks, good on you. They seem like a good idea. My gosh, are these a pain in the neck. The back one seems pretty squared away right now. The one at the front still seems like it has some gaps. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out. The one up front was fine. The little kind of recoil lug area up front. But yeah, I'm seeing some gaps right in there. So we're gonna fill this in just a little bit. I should be seeing more squish out the top, and I'm just not seeing it. Here we go, guys. They both look pretty good. They have good coverage all the way around. I'm liking the way that this looks, except that you can see that there's no daylight through these holes, so we do need to flush some of this out. And here's the big quandary. Do I go down or up? Let's see. I'm gonna hit it away from the action, so I'll push it out the bottom. That was quite a glob right there. And I'm gonna re-grease the inside of the hole. This is it, guys. Are you happy with what you see? If not, this is your only chance to make changes. You don't have much longer to work with this. But for now, I am happy. The underside is not looking ugly. I don't see a big mess going on. Everything seems to be pretty well greased still. So now what we're gonna do is install the action. And this may take a little bit of fiddling to get this to fit exactly with your V-blocks. There we go. It's gonna take a little bit of moving around to get everything to square up nicely with your action. You may need to shift some things around. Okay, and right there, this feels like the spot. This feels good. Now we're going to install the screws. Remember that we are using the replacement ones. These are the ones that came in the bag, and that in your bag, you got one of these. These are the mag catches. One of these is going to be for the short action. So that's going to be ACF, American Center Fire Short Action. And right now we are dealing with long action. So this is going to be that front mag catch. Okay, I have that just started. We do have the trigger guard in place. Here is the rear action screw. As you get the screws in place, don't tighten them down yet. We only want to go most of the way down. Before we apply final torque, this is a good opportunity to make sure that our barrel is pointed directly down the center of the channel. Those V-blocks can float left and right, and they can help to aim this entire contraption the direction that we want it to go. So I have a couple pieces of paper here, and we are going to manually adjust this barrel, and then we're going to torque this down. This one might need a little bit of extra barrel relief anyway. This one feels a little bit on the tight side. We can come back and do that later. I've shown how to do that in previous videos. You just need a dowel and some sandpaper and you can open it up a bit if something is touching. These screws were a bit tight to get into place. I have not torqued these down though. I don't have them all the way down. They're still sitting kind of loose in the action. There is one step that we need to take before we tighten these down. We need to put this on its butt and then give it a drop. A few drops. Let everything settle backward, because remember, that's where the recoil goes. We want the action to push back into the stock, and then we are going to tighten everything down the way it is right here. We're not going to actually apply final torque to this. We're going to get it just kind of hand tight. Okay, so that's feeling pretty good. And also, watch out for your torque on the rear here. This does have a steel pillar that runs through, but right now we're using the plastic trigger guard and not the metal. So I'm not going to crank this down and risk splitting this trigger guard. I did that in the past with our other plastic model. This one should be able to take a good bit more abuse, but I'm still just going to do kind of hand tight and leave it there. And speaking of leaving it there, we're going to let this dry for the next 24 hours. But we still have a few minutes of work time, so I'm going to get rid of any of the extra epoxy that dripped down into the mag well. We can clean this up later with the Dremel tool, but might as well do it while it's easy. That's it. We'll come back and check this tomorrow. 24 hours have passed. Time to check our work. Okay, I obviously have a little epoxy on that screw. Not gonna hurt anything. There we go, that one too. Yeah, I can see some in the threads there. A wire brush will clean that up easily. I don't see any on this screw. I think that the epoxy is probably filling the hole a little bit in there. The action and the stock are probably going to stick together a little bit, so I'm just going to apply a little pressure. There we go. I see some epoxy sticking right in here near the trigger assembly. Just a tiny bit, so that'll be easy to scrape away. Aside from that, everything has come out pretty clean on the action. There we go. Yeah, we have some that is squished out the front. We can just chip this away pretty easily, and then yeah, right back here in front of the trigger assembly. So if you want, you can take a Dremel tool and maybe knock some of this off just a little bit, but really this should be kind of brittle, and we should be able to just knock this off. You can take a mallet and just a little piece of wood, and you can kind of knock bits of this away and it'll come clean. But everything here is looking fine. We've done all kinds of horrible, unnatural things to this action, so make sure that you get in there and get everything very clean. You might have knocked some epoxy up into the action here, so just make sure that you clean all that out, get as much dust out as you can. And as you can see, some of the places where we removed a lot of the shoe polish here from the action, these are going to be the areas that are going to be most prone to rust. We've removed any kind of protection they might have had just through all this scraping and cleaning, and it's time to make sure that when we do get this put back together, if we're out in the rain, that these areas that will rust pretty quickly are going to be taken care of. So I'm using Modern Spartan Systems Accuracy Oil. I use this on pretty much everything now, and this should keep our action nice and safe. So I'm just going to smear this around in this sort of general area. Actually, I'm just going to cover the whole action because this is something that when it sits here up in the stock, it can tend to collect moisture. Just wipe away any excess. As we install the action for the last time, I do want to point out that while this plastic mag catch that comes in the box is going to work just great, that we do have one of those upgraded parts that we talked about. This is the Ruger American mag catch in aluminum, and for a few extra bucks, I do recommend it. Go ahead and throw it into the cart. It just feels a little extra nice. You can see that it has these nice smooth edges. It should catch in just the right way without causing any problems. So there you have it. You can torque this down to final specs here. If you do use the plastic trigger guard back here, keep in mind that this probably will not accept all the torque that Ruger recommends. It will probably split your trigger guard. So get the metal one if you want to make sure that everything is squared away just right. However, in general, it's considered that the torque on the front one is the more important one. So as long as you get this should be good. And you can back off just a tad back here. Let's make sure that the magazine actually seats. Yep, I can't push it out. Mag latch is working fine. Okay, we're in business. Now to swap the butt pad over to the Limbsaver. The big thing to remember here is to grease up your screwdriver just a little bit so you don't tear up the butt pad so much. This has a pretty tight fit around these screws. So I'm using as small a screwdriver as possible. Installation is just the reverse, but keep in mind that the head of the screw is very large compared to the hole that we have here. So this is another item we're going to have to grease down in order to keep from damaging the butt pad. Does it really matter? Probably not. But it's going to help keep everything nice and pretty. Okay, because we greased it, look, no tears. It's as if nothing happened. Many thanks to my father-in-law for showing me that trick.
Here you go, guys. It is all put together, and as you can see, it is gorgeous. Now, this is one of the trickier installs that we might have to do with any of the Boyds stocks, just because of those V-blocks. If you have a Remington 700 or one of the standard Savage actions, you're just going to have a simple recoil lug, and you're going to have a couple of screws, and that's it. It's very simple to set one of those up. This one takes a lot more work by far. Now, if you want to see me swap over a Savage axis into this Boyds spike camp, then check out this video. I'm going to put a link to that down here. I'm not sure if I'm going to release that after or before I post this video, but at some point I will get a link to that up there. And you'll see how simple that is. This one takes a couple extra steps versus the normal Savage action, but it's still pretty simple. Let's see how this actually feels. All right, so we have the bigger, thicker butt pad. I've replaced this panel up here. It's just 2 screws. I did that off camera. And let's see how this works. Okay. I just love the feel of a good thumb hole stock. It's sort of like a vertical grip, but it just kind of, it's a blend of the two. Since it is still laid back just a little bit, you're gonna get that great feel when you lean forward into your rifle. And I think that this will be fine in the prone. I think this is going to feel great. And it's such an easy reach to the trigger on this. I'm going to go ahead and put this on fire. We'll open this up. Nothing in the mag, nothing in the chamber. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, this feels very stable overall. I will say that the Ruger American trigger, I don't know if this is tuned yet or not. This is definitely a little on the heavy side, but it has a very small over travel and very crisp. Feels great. Some of the earlier ones that I felt were kind of rubbery. They had some creep going on, but this one rocks. Now let's talk about balance point. Let's see where this ended up. Okay, this one right now is balancing on my knuckle right there in the middle of the magazine. So this one is a little further forward than it should be. In general, people say that you want that weight right up toward the front of the action. Now remember, this one is going to get a scope on it, and it's going to get a can at some point. So I think that this is actually going to be just perfect, because we're going to be hanging about a pound of weight, depending on what can they put on this. But yeah, I think that's gonna be just about right. That extra hardware that we have at the back is gonna fix a lot of the issues that we would have gotten if we had stuck with a lighter stock. Thanks for watching. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe, and especially hit that notification bell down below. That's going to let you know when new videos come out, because YouTube doesn't want this info out there, and we have a lot of really exciting things coming up here in the near future. We're going to be testing all kinds of cool rifles. We're going to be testing some wacky hand loads. We're going to be doing more ballistics gel tests, and we have some kind of closer up work that we're going to be getting into. It's going to be pretty interesting around here, and you won't want to miss out. Hit that notification bell. Thank you to patrons of the Destructive Arts that make videos like these possible. We have Stan and Mary and Sportsman's Guide at the 338 Lapua Magnum level. We have Joseph Davis, Mr. No Name, and Peter at the 300 Win Mag level. And if anybody else wants to chip in $1 or $2 a month, like a whole gob of other guys and gals that just help to keep us in bullets and powder, I'll put a link to Patreon. I'll see you guys around. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Even if you didn't like this particular content, go ahead and subscribe. There's probably something coming that's more up your alley. Check out this playlist right here. This is going to have videos in a similar vein to what you just watched. These 2 videos we cherry-picked for you. And finally, The Social Regressive is on Patreon. So, you can become a patron of the Destructive Arts and earn some goodies while helping us to provide high-quality videos just by kicking us a few bucks a month. Thanks a bunch for your patronage.